Welcome to the What's Your Deal podcast, where we discuss business acquisitions, investments, management, and exit strategies. I'm your host, Matt Uhler. Let's dive in. Well, welcome back to another episode of What's Your Deal. Today we have a very special guest, Robert Kiyosaki. And if you're not familiar with the name, you're going to learn a whole lot, but it would be hard for you not to be familiar with the name. And so it's truly an honor for me to have Robert with us today and speaking to our audience on his career and what he's done, which is truly extraordinary. So let me go ahead and introduce him, and then we will dive in. So Robert Kiyosaki is best known as the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, one of the best-selling personal finance books of all time. Since its publication in 1997, the book has sold more than 40 million copies worldwide and has been translated into dozens of languages and has influenced how many millions of people think about money, investing, and financial independence. Over the past 3 decades, Robert has built a global platform around financial education, challenging conventional wisdom about work, savings, and investing. Through his books, speaking, and the Rich Dad brand, he has consistently encouraged people to think less like employees and more like owners of assets. Robert, welcome to the What's Your Deal podcast.
Matt, my honor. And if I give a shout out, we met you at Aspire.
Yes.
And, Andrew's event, and I was so impressed there. There's such a it's a big organization.
It really is, and it's fairly young as well.
Yeah, to run it so well, I was impressed. Because, crowd control is the biggest part of business.
Right.
Aspire did a great job. So I was happy to meet you and a bunch of other young speakers. So it was my pleasure to be there.
Yes, thank you so much. And again, it was an honor to be able to go on stage after you that day, which is just extraordinary. So as we dive through, I'm excited to get into lots of topics, but the first one I want to talk about, because what you've done with your book and what's become really just an unbelievable movement, started out with you being, numerous publishers declining to publish that book that then ended up selling over 40 million copies. So can you share with us how that evolved and just also how you had the wherewithal to keep going?
Well, in real life, not academic life, in real life, rejection is part of life. And if you can't handle a rejection, you can't handle real life. So I went to military school in New York. When I was at the Naval Academy on Kings Point. So I went to military school, and man, if you can't handle harassment, you can't handle real life. So, life is about really getting prepared for real life. And with that said, is that when I flew for the U.S. Marine Corps as a pilot, went down 3 times. And when I came back, I asked my poor dad, he was a great man, PhD from Stanford, University of Chicago and all that, but an academic. And so I asked my poor dad, what should I do? He said, well, go back to school, fly for United Airlines, and get your PhD. Why do I need a PhD? Fly for the airlines. But that's their culture. Academics' culture is you got to be smarter than everybody else. I just want to be a better pilot. Mm-hmm. And my rich dad I said, I want to be an entrepreneur with my rich dad. And he says, well, to be an entrepreneur takes different skill sets that even pilots don't have. Mm-hmm. So if I'm going to be a good pilot, obviously one is how to crash. And I went down 3 times. But as an entrepreneur, you have to learn how to sell. You have to learn how to raise capital. I had to learn how to use debt. And I had to learn how to handle rejection. And I bitched and moaned. I was 1974, I'm getting out of the Marine Corps. I'm about 25 years old. I said, I don't want to sell. I don't want to sell. Because my poor dad, an academic like Mark, this is the Communist Manifesto here. I had to read this book at military school. And Marx was an academic. And academics are like my poor dad. And most school teachers are like academics. Mm-hmm. And they think if they have a college degree, they're better than you. That's their culture. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so I said, I don't want to sell. And my poor dad saying, don't you sell, don't you sell. And so finally I asked my rich dad, I said, why do I have to sell? And I'm still a Marine. I'm still coming out, as a pilot. Thought I was John Wayne or something, or Brad Pitt, or what was his name? Tom Cruise.
Uh-huh.
And he says, Robert, how's your sex life? And I said, I'm not getting laid. He says, can't sell. So he says, man, if you don't start selling, because you can't handle rejection, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're not going to find the woman of your life and all that, because they're not just waiting. They're just not waiting for you. So long story short, when I met my wife, Kim, I think I asked her out 50 times.
Wow.
Just kept saying no, no, no. And finally she goes, this guy's pretty determined. But that's rejection and, pitching, selling, raising capital, using debt. Those are the skill sets of an entrepreneur that they don't teach at school.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things I'm curious about, I've heard this saying that, everybody said it couldn't be done, and then I proved them right, as opposed to wrong.
Yeah.
So how did you, something in you knew that your book and what you had to teach and share with the world was the right path for you, despite what the outside world was showing you. So what is the distinction between when tenacity is just too much and you need to pivot, as opposed to what you did with your wife, Kim, and with the book? You just kept going, and it was a winner.
That's a very sophisticated question you asked. One of the things my rich dad, and man, I stayed with Dr. R. Buckminster Fuller. He invented the geodesic dome and all this. And Fuller was a futurist. And so the reason I studied with Bucky Fuller, because he's a futurist, my rich dad said, if you're going to be rich, you have to see the future. In other words, you don't do things that happened yesterday. You're preparing for the future. So let's look at today. This is March 2026. Today, we have a battle going on in Iran, and the price of oil is going through the roof. Simultaneously, the U.S. dollar is the U.S. is the biggest debtor nation in world history. Simultaneously, American people are living not paycheck to paycheck, but credit card to credit card today. And the reason for that was back in 1971, when I was flying off a carrier in Vietnam. Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, and then I could see the future. In other words, they were going to print this fake money called the US dollar. And when I saw that, I said, oh my God, I better buy some gold. So back in 1971, seeing the future, because debt would go up, and not that debt's going up, the purchasing power of the dollar is coming down. That's seeing the future. So I started saving, this is silver here. This is a real silver dollar. This is worth $10 today because it's silver. Because it's pre-64. And I started buying gold. So today I own gold mines. You can see my cash flow board game up there. I own gold mines. I own silver mines. But I had to do it to see the future. And today you have AI coming in. And so I look at young guys like you, and I'm going, so what are you telling your kids? Go to school and get a job? You got to be crazy. AI is probably going to take your job right away. But so many people are still living in the past. What happened back then? I look at AI right now and I cringe. I go, holy moly. If I'm a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant, AI is going to replace me.
It's pretty amazing.
When I say that to doctors or like anesthesiologists and all that, they go, oh, you know what you're talking about. And that's the problem with people that are not rich, because they can't see the future. And when you're investing, you're looking into the future. So the future is really clear. I'll say it again. Debt is out of control. Oil is going to go through the roof. And the dollar is going to crash.
Wow. So there's a lot there. Why don't we, if we can, let's drill into debt, because I know what you teach about debt, consumer debt versus income producing debt, that's part of the pushback that you received when you first published the book. So can you share with us your idea about debt? And then also, there's so much consumer debt right now that it is scary.
Yeah. Well, 71, when Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, the US dollar became debt. And everybody said, well, it's US bonds, And I talked to the financial planners, and they say bonds are safe. And today, this is 2026. It was safe in 1974. But 2026, China and Japan are dumping our bonds. They're buying gold instead. So you're going to still buy bonds because your stupid financial planner told you to buy some bonds because they're safe? God, wake up, But that's what I'm saying, is that to be a good entrepreneur, a good investor, you'd better be tuned in to today and the future. So I think America's in serious trouble. This Hormuz. I'm a tanker. I mean, believe it or not, I went to the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point, New York. My background is oil.
Interesting.
So I studied oil. My first job was with Standard Oil of California. I drove tankers for them. So I understand oil. Yesterday, I bought another $1 million worth of oil.
Wow.
Because oil's going to go up. I didn't buy the oil. I bought the oil well. Okay, so that's how you get rich. You can see, it's so obvious. Price of oil is going to go up.
When you speak like that, it helps me to understand the distinction between the way most people think, or a lot of people think, and the way you're thinking. I'm not picking up fear from you about what might happen with this or that or the other thing. You're seeing opportunity. And like you said, you're focused on the future. So is that something you practiced? Obviously you were taught that, but it's a different way of showing up in life, the way you're sharing.
Let me ask you this, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
I'm technologically retarded.
Okay.
I can barely use a cell phone. And I don't know anything about AI, but they borrowed this commercial private credit or something, private credit. They invested in AI like crazy. So they're putting all this money in AI. So you go, what's the ripple effect from that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that means they're going to, how many jobs did Mattel just let go of? How many jobs did these tech guys let go of? And are you saying to your child, oh, go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, invest for the long term in the stock market, and get out of debt? You tell your kid that, you're as obsolete as me technology-wise.
I do.
See the future, smell the coffee. AI is going to change the world again, just like the PC changed the world.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. We just had an episode not too long ago on with a person who's a specialist in AI, and we use that exact same analogy that, back when the computer came out and it was no longer a typewriter, that was a big deal. And when it was, automobiles instead of bicycles, and, so this might be another evolution. But to your point, there are enormous jobs that are becoming obsolete because of AI, and understanding how to stay ahead of that is really, to a large extent, what your book and what your brand teaches, is just a different way of thinking about life and how to show up.
Yeah, that's why I teach entrepreneurship. I've Rich Dad, Poor Dad. My second book is called The Cash Flow Quadrant, ESBI. Employees have a mindset, which is go to school, get a job.
Mm-hmm.
And S is like a specialist, like a doctor or a smart guy. Go to school, become a doctor, lawyer, accountant. B says, I want 500 employees. And I said, I want to be an insider. And that's all in my board game here.
Mm-hmm.
This is old technology, but the board game trains your brain and your hand and your mind to think differently.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I have this board game here that came out in 1996. And then my problem was I didn't know how to sell it. So I wrote a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And every publisher turned it down. But that's how we started this whole thing, Matt. Rejection. Mm-hmm. You can't handle rejection, kiss your butt goodbye.
Oh man, and again, it's an easier thing that's to say than it is to do sometimes, because I know I don't like rejection, and I've become accustomed to it in areas, but it does make me question if I'm on the right path sometimes when there's a group saying I'm not.
My wife this is years and years and years ago, 40 years ago. And I kept asking her out. And finally I said, what's wrong? She says, no. She says, no. Everybody was hitting on her. Every guy wanted her,
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, I better get smart. So I asked a friend, I said, what do you know about Kim Meyer? And her name was Phyllis. I was asking who's my friend's assistant. Phyllis looks at me and says, "You dumb shit. Kim's best friend is your ex-girlfriend." I went, "What?" Yes. She says, "If you've done some market research, you find out." So my ex-girlfriend was Karen Spicer, and that was Kim's best friend. So I called Karen up, and Karen hated me. So "Why should I talk to you, you son of a bitch?" I said, "Tell me about Kim. Tell me about Kim." She says, and she was hot as hell, And she says, "She's so sick and tired of bird dogs like me. Oh, let's travel to Maui. Let's go have dinner." She says, "She's so tired of it." I said, "Tell me, what does Kim like?" That was my first, what do you call it, market research question. What does she like? She says,
Mm-hmm.
"Kim likes the champagne, and she likes moonlight walks on the beach." I went, "Hot dog, that's cheap."
Right, you could do that.
And so I set it up that I took her to this restaurant. The maitre d' was already graced, paid the maitre d' like $5. As soon as the champagne arrived, so I didn't have to buy dinner. He says, "Robert, why don't you take your date for a walk on the beach?" So I didn't have to buy dinner or anything like that. Kim and I sat there sipping champagne on the beach, and we fell in love.
Wow.
So that's how you get smarter as an entrepreneur. Rejection, but you got to do your market research and understand what your customer wants.
Very good. Well, there's certainly huge wisdom in those three pieces, right? Just right there. And so when did you learn to start thinking this way, that what a lot of people were thinking was different than your approach?
Well, again, it was having a rich dad and a poor dad.
Mm-hmm.
My poor dad was Stanford graduate, University of Chicago, Northwestern, PhD, head of education. And they think poorly. They think like poor people. They think like this guy Marx here. Marx was an intellectual.
Okay.
They think you have good grades, they're better than you. So that's what my rich dad's my best friend's father. He says, "No, my banker's never asked me for my report card yet." My banker wants to see my financial statement. I went, "Oh my God." So if you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it's only a story of a financial statement.
Mm-hmm.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad is an accounting book, the most single, boring subject on planet Earth. And the cash flow board game, which came before Rich Dad, Poor Dad, is a game teaching you accounting. And if you can't understand cash flow, you shouldn't be an entrepreneur. So I play this game, and I don't play this game, but this game is published all over the world. There's clubs all over the world. And people are teaching people how to think like an entrepreneur, an investor. But they're learning basic accounting and having fun and getting richer.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to go to school.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, and you were faced with a decision, right? You had two examples, and I know it's clear in the book, but I mean, you chose the one that's completely changed your life as a model and a belief system, as opposed to the other one that was right there in front of you, and you could have just as simply gone that direction.
Yeah, and that book it always shocks me. Like, I flunked out of high school because I can't write. Can you imagine that? And it's still number one in the world.
It's truly amazing.
Yeah. And of course, the guys that turned it down, the publishers like Simon & Schuster,
Mm-hmm.
said, when it comes to money, you don't know what you're talking about. But they're all like my poor dad. They're all like PhDs. They're all like the Federal Reserve Bank guys. They're all PhDs.
Mm-hmm.
PhD stands for poor, helpless, and desperate. They all need a paycheck. So I don't need a paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
You're a free man. We don't need a paycheck.
Isn't that the truth?
But a PhD needs a paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't trust them.
Okay. Very good. Well, so let's dive into this concept or this conversation about debt. Again, there's so many people wanting to keep up with the Joneses and using debt, consumer debt to get there. And yet I know you're not afraid of debt, but it's the right kind of debt. Can you walk us through that mindset that you have around debt?
Yeah, historically, debt has killed nations. Brought down China, brought down Germany, brought down Rome. And then in 1971, I was a carrier pilot off of Vietnam, U.S. Marine. And my rich dad wrote me a letter. He says, watch out, Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, it means the dollar became debt. That was 1971. So what does that mean? What's that mean? He says, buy gold. And so the story I tell is I flew behind enemy lines because Marines aren't the brightest guys on earth. And the NVA, North Vietnamese Army, had overrun this gold mine. And I looked at my co-pilot and I said, should we go buy some gold? He says, yeah, let's go buy some gold. So we flew behind enemy lines to buy gold. And then we found out we didn't know what gold was. Marines, Marines aren't the brightest guys on earth. And so we went home empty-handed. But it got to me. I went, oh my God, the monetary system of the world is changing. That was 1971. What does that mean? So today I own gold mines. I own gold, silver. I don't save dollars. If you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I said, rich don't save money because they're printing it. And every time they print money, the poor and middle class get poorer. Let me explain that. When you print money, like I own apartment houses, which I use debt to buy. When you print money, the apartment house goes up in value. The asset goes up. But when you print money, chicken, eggs, and cheese goes up too. So today, this huge gap between rich and poor, middle class. Homelessness is exploding. My generation of boomers, they're living in trailers right now because their 401ks are failing.
So when you refer to the debt that you use to buy multifamily homes, it's income producing debt, right? So your decision about incurring that debt and purchasing that asset is a financial decision as opposed to an emotional decision, I would assume.
Yeah, I like getting rich. When I meet somebody who says that they don't have any money, it's because they don't understand debt. Because they drank the Kool-Aid, live debt free. That's Dave Ramsey. Dave's a friend of mine. And for most of Dave Ramsey's clientele, should we say, they should live debt free because they're not taking the time to study. It's like you went to Aspire to learn, right? Mm-hmm. I went to Aspire. The best thing about my life is I get to speak at things like Aspire, but I get to listen to guys like you. I go to learn too. And most of Dave Ramsey's people, they're not learners. They're followers, they're sheep. So they should live debt free. You know what I mean? It depends on you. Well, I had to learn how to use debt. So I came out of the Marine Corps in 1974. I had to take a course on real estate to learn how to use debt. And today I'm $1.2 billion in debt because debt became money in 1971. But they don't teach you that in school. Mm-hmm. So I buy things that make me rich. The last thing I'll say is this. You're up in Prescott. I have one of my best properties still up there. It's called Forest Ridge. It's in, what's the town? Flagstaff. Mm-hmm. So I bought it about 15 years ago. I bought this property, Forest Ridge in Flagstaff. It was a piece of shit. So we fixed it, We bought it, fixed it. My partner, Ken McElroy, did it. And we stepped up the rent. So as you improve the property, the rent goes up. Mm-hmm. When the rent goes up, the valuation of the asset goes up. So we took that money, we took the old debt, let's use some money simple. Let's say we paid $1 million for this property in Flagstaff. Uh-huh. And now the property is worth $4 million because the rent. Makes sense to you?
It does, yeah. Income producing asset, right? And so ideally it paid for itself and paid for the debt and continued to appreciate and
appreciate the property because the income kept going up, NOI, net operating income. Mm-hmm. So then because the NOI went back to the bank says, we'll give you $3 million more. So we still own the property. We just borrowed out $3 million more. Mm-hmm. Tax free. Why is it money tax free? Because it's debt. And because I got the $3 million, 1.5 came to me. I called my friend Mike Maselli. I said, Mike, I need $1 million in oil. He says, you got it. So I bought $1 million worth of oil wells in Texas and North Dakota. As the price of oil is going up, they keep printing more money. They're shooting each other in Hormuz. The price of oil is going up. And every time it goes up, I don't buy the oil. I don't sell the oil stocks. I sell the oil, cash flow from oil. That's how the rich get richer. None of this bullshit about go to school and get a job and put your money in a stupid 401k and buy bonds. That's for losers. You know what I mean?
So as far as the education to know what to buy, I mean, a house in Flagstaff, an oil well,
Not a house, apartment house.
An apartment house. Yeah. So how do you educate yourself about the areas where you see an opportunity and then pull the trigger? I mean, clearly you're not afraid of pulling the trigger, but what does that look like for somebody who's just starting to learn this way of thinking?
First of all, you have to educate yourself. You got to flush the toilet of your brain. You see, most people are still living like their mother and father taught them to live. You know what I mean? They probably still went to college, they're still saving money. They still think a house is an asset. You should buy a cash flow game, play it 10 times, teach 10 people, your brain will change. The difference between assets and liabilities. If you don't change the way you think, there's an F word that goes with it. You're effed.
Right. I'm familiar with that word.
Same result. Mm-hmm. And I meet poor people, they're highly educated people, but, oh, my daughter, she just graduated from the University of Washington. And I asked them, and how much money do you make? Well, I have a job with the government. And what do you think your daughter's going to do? Oh, she's going to get a job with the government too. Like mother, like father, like child. It's called a paradigm matrix. You become who your parents are. And so that's why I was blessed to have rich dad and a poor dad. So they both hated each other.
Did they really?
Listen to both of them. And my brothers and sisters only had a poor dad.
Wow.
Big difference. It's called a paradigm matrix. It's like parent, like child, like child, like parent.
Well, I was just talking with a gentleman yesterday who's a teacher. He's been a teacher his whole life, and he's just finishing reading your book. And extremely smart individual, very educated, and yet the concepts in your book are it's a new language for him, and it's a new way of thinking, but he knows he wants something different. And I think that's probably where the seed starts, right? It's he wants, right now he's trading time for dollars.
You should, when I first I created the cash flow board game in '96. Why? Because Maria Montessori, in a Montessori school system, she says what the hand does, the mind remembers. Think about that. So you go to school, you listen to a school teacher who has no idea what they're talking about, teaching you accounting. And it goes in one ear and out the other. So I created this board game so I could learn accounting. I could teach accounting, have fun, boring subject. The Maria Montessori said what the hand does, the mind remembers. That was the whole start of it. And then so people could learn by changing their brain. When you change your brain, you change your life. But if you sit in a classroom listening to, I signed up for an MBA program, big mistake. I sat in the accounting class, I was sound asleep. And I finally asked the accounting teacher, I said, are you an accountant? He says, I teach accountancy. I said, I was a Marine at the time. I was still flying for the Marine Corps. And I said, are you an accountant? He goes, I teach accountancy. I said, that's not the question. And he kicked me out of the class. He's not an accountant. He teaches accountancy. You see, he can't practice what he teaches.
Huge distinction. Yeah, huge distinction.
It's like Tiger Woods can't learn to be a great golfer reading a book or a lecture. You have to pick up that golf club, make a lot of mistakes. A school teacher, don't make mistakes. They're criminals. Every school teacher should be, shown the door someplace and say, look, wake up. You don't learn this way. You don't learn by lecture. You learn by doing. So that's the difference. And so the entrepreneur has to learn by doing. If you're going to be an employee, all you have is what? I'm a receptionist. Not that bad.
Mm-hmm.
But if you own a big company, like a Google or something like that, boy, you got a big job on your hands.
Sure do.
So most people are not qualified to be entrepreneurs. That's the problem. That's why I created Cash Flow Board Game, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and all this. And not everybody should be employees.
Mm-hmm.
We need employers. Not everybody should be entrepreneurs.
I see.
We need employees.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want
So you've obviously had all kinds of business activity and things, and I'm assuming you've faced some adversity as well, or places where it didn't work out the way you wanted. How do you process that yourself?
Well, you don't learn unless you fail.
Mm.
You think of a baby learning how to walk. Baby doesn't stand up and run a marathon. Baby stands and falls, stands and falls, stands and falls. Then they learn how to walk. Same as riding a bicycle. So after you learn how to walk in on a bicycle, you fall. Well, what do our schools do? If the baby falls, they slap him.
Mm.
You stupid kid! I'm going to read between the lines, man.
Mm-hmm.
I hated school. I just hated it. But I loved flight school.
Why is that?
I had to learn by flying.
Wow.
And I loved it. I just loved it. I was a pilot. I loved it.
Well, it's interesting as you're talking, I'm thinking about some of the distinctions with being okay with failure, right? Because that's how we learn. And in schools, how we're not allowed to fail. And flight school was great for you, but failing in the air can be a problem, right? But yet you navigated that.
Yeah. I went down 3 times, broke my back, everything.
Really? Well, I guess that's an example. So you learned each of those times, I'm sure.
So I create the cash flow board game. So you don't have to go inside the school system. You can buy a game and you can teach 10 people. So you're making 10 other people richer, give and you shall receive.
Mm-hmm.
But you're also getting smarter. You don't have to go to school. And you can come on YouTube, a lot of flakes on YouTube, but there's more flakes at universities. So like I listen to a lot of people on YouTube who are just brilliant, like Jim Rogers, Jim Rickards, and with Lawrence Lepard. I listen to certain people on YouTube all the time because they're real teachers. I go to colleges, they're fake. They're as phony as they come. They're like my poor dad. So like when I went to Vietnam, I wanted to find out which pilot had crashed the most times. So I was stationed at Camp Pendleton at the time, getting ready to go to Vietnam. And I said, well, Forrester went down the most times. So I went to Forrester, Captain Forrester. I said, Captain, Lieutenant Kiyosaki, he said, what did you learn in your crashes? You know what the lesson was? Don't lace up your boots.
Really?
I went, what? Yeah. Because we flew off a carrier.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, if you're on land, then you want boots to be tied up. But it says the odds are you're going to crash in the ocean. He did. So every time I flew, all the other pilots had their boats tied up because they go up to your ankle, your calf. Mine were unleashed. And that kept me alive because the first time I went down, those boots are steel-toed.
Mm-hmm.
And so the aircraft goes down. I was drowning. I just kicked my boots off and went back up. So you learn from people who have done it. That makes sense to you.
Oh, that's powerful.
Choose your teachers.
Yeah, that's very powerful. And I think part of it's being willing to choose, right? As opposed to just doing what we're told all the time and following the herd.
So anyway, that's just my life. I learned about teachers in Sunday school. And my mother was a church lady, And I hated school and I hated going to church too. My poor dad had to drag me and say, like, I'll make you a deal. I'll make you a deal. So my dad says, keep your mother happy. You go to church till you're 12. But I'm not going to tell you what church to go to.
Mm.
And he suggested, I asked my classmates at school, this is in Hawaii, what church you go to. So I went to Buddhist temple, went to Mormon temple, Catholic, Methodist, I studied different people. And one day I was sitting in this class and this young teacher said, she goes, why were the wise men wise? I went, what? She goes, why were the wise men wise? And I raised my hand and said, because they're rich. And I was like 10 years old. She goes, and Methodist Church, the love of money is root of all evil.
Right.
She goes, how can you say they were rich? I said, one had gold, one had frankincense, and one had myrrh. They were rich. 10 years old. And she goes, that's not the answer. So, well, what's the answer? She says, they were seeking, three wise men were seeking the best teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I went, wow. So that lesson went straight through my head. Not really religious, but I like the lesson.
Yeah.
I said, I'm listening to my old man and my mother, who are highly educated poor people. It's called a paradigm matrix, like father, like son. You become the culture of your home.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's hard for poor people to become rich, because they grew up in a poor environment. So I'm going, oh my God, I'm listening to two really good people, mom and dad, but they're poor. They say, they always say, I can't afford it. I can't afford it. Think I made of money. So I said, I better find a new teacher. And that's when I found Rich Dad.
Very good.
And I said, that made the difference in my life, because I had another teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So your teachers are wise. That's why Aspire was the great event, because I go there to learn too.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of phonies and flakes up there too, but you listen to them. Some have some good points.
So you take what serves you and you leave the rest.
Well, it's kind of fit my need. It's a puzzle. We're all putting puzzles together. So like when they bombed, I'm a history buff, 1956, the English lost everything because there was a Suez crisis, 1956. So I think it was Roosevelt, called England and said, hey, you guys, pay your debt off. And they were stuck in Suez. So when that happened, the English empire collapsed in 1956 because they were so deeply in debt. So here it is, 2026. America's trapped in Hormuz. So it kind of rhymes, Suez, Hormuz, oil. And so I go, okay, what does the future tell me? Well, the price of oil is going to go up. So I used debt to sell my Flagstaff. I refinanced my Flagstaff parties. I still own it, still get income from it. Took $1.6 million out and bought oil. Mm-hmm. And the price of oil goes up. I don't save my money. I want the asset that cash flows. That's the difference. That's what I teach in Rich Dad Poor. That's what the game teaches. Mm-hmm. But you got to train your brain to think that way. Otherwise, you think like your mommy and your daddy.
Which may not be the ideal scenario.
No, it's called your culture.
Yeah. Yeah. And for most of us, I think that's true.
That's why so many professional athletes, they're broke 6 years after being multimillionaires. They just have their old patterns from their family come out. And so they go broke. They make millions when they're 24 or 25, and then they're broke by the time they're 30. Paradigm matrix kicks in. Like father, like son, like mother, like daughter, kicks in.
Yeah, we go back to what we're familiar with, right? It's just, it's there. So how do we stop that? How does somebody who aspires for something different than what they might have seen growing up?
That's why the cash flow board game. Mm-hmm. You got to break the pattern in your brain. Maria Montessori, great entrepreneur. Maria Montessori school system. What the hand does, the mind remembers. Mm-hmm. So that board game is you've actually got to fill in with an eraser and all that and change numbers around. And, well, money's coming this way, money's coming that way. Or you can get your MBA and listen to some stupid accounting teacher who that's not an accountant. I'd rather do it. It's like Tiger Woods didn't become the greatest golfer on earth listening to a lecture. Mm-hmm. I think Tiger Woods hit more bad balls. I mean, he's rolled his car over the other day, but I haven't done that one. Mm-hmm. But anyway, you know what I mean? He had to hit bad balls to win.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say in school, if a baby falls down, they punish the kid. You stupid kid, you fell down. Well, that's how kid learns how to walk.
Mm-hmm.
Academics have a lot to answer for. They have a lot to answer for.
So I understand that you were recently honored by the National Veterans Foundation and served as the Grand Marshal for the National Veterans Parade for your service as a Marine Corps helicopter pilot in Vietnam. That's an amazing honor, and thank you for your service as well.
Hey, Matt, thank you for. I can't believe it.
Really?
Can't believe it. Me, the national veteran in 2026.
So much of what you're sharing is these tidbits of like how to think and how to evaluate decisions and life and core values that stand true for creating a life that we aspire to.
Yeah, but since that court martial, when I lost money in investments and all that,
Mm-hmm.
I told the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I lost about $600,000 once in a bad investment. I called all my investors up. I said, "Hey, I screwed up." They said, "Hey, no problem. Give us another call. We have another deal."
Wow.
Or I could have tried to hide it.
Uh-huh.
That makes sense.
It does. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah. I suggest everybody watch A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. And we have walls. It takes men with guns to protect those walls. Who's going to do that? You, Lieutenant Weinberg? You? That's a great movie.
It is a great movie.
Marines are great people, man. They kicked my ass because I was such a badass. Not a badass, but I was just a bad Marine. And now I'm a veteran going, veteran parade.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be a God someplace.
Yes.
So I love it. I mean, life is this adventure we go on.
Mm-hmm.
And just tell the truth.
Well, I appreciate some of what you've shared with us here, just being core, fundamental, down to earth gold dust, right? Just the basics of what works, and then the repetitions and being willing to trip and fall and fail and keep going. And it's what you've accomplished is truly extraordinary. And the amount of people that you've helped see things differently and take on a different life has been the beginning for a lot to be able to pursue a different life, because where else would they go?
Yeah, human beings are designed to make mistakes and learn. But in our schools, we punish you for making mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, the Marine Corps taught me to tell the truth when I made mistakes.
Mm.
And that's how you learn. You pretend you didn't make a mistake, you don't learn a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really the lesson there. It was, I love the U.S. Marine Corps. It goes Semper Fi.
Mm-hmm.
But my friends are still my friends, as big a F up as I am. And they're all come see me in the parade.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I like to finish my podcast with, which again, your whole book is about this, but oftentimes I'll ask people, so who gave you a hand up when you needed a hand up or when you didn't believe in yourself? And I wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing with us and our audience, somebody who gave you a hand up when you didn't believe in yourself or when you were being, declined by publishers, or even your wife, Kim, declined over and over again. Who's helped you along the way that might be surprising for our audience to hear?
Well, it's not surprising. It's a thing called great teachers. I've had great teachers also.
Mm-hmm.
And one of I said earlier, his name was Buckminster Fuller. And he invented the geodesic dome and all that. And he was a Harvard dropout. But boy, he kicked my butt too, because it was one time I was with him studying in Kirkwood, California. He talked about Bitcoin. He didn't call it Bitcoin. He says, there'll be a new form of money coming about. So how do you know that? He was watching electronic games. So the kids that were playing games, he says, that's going to be money. So he could see kids' games being money. And then one day he was talking to me and he says, someday a new technology is going to come about and replace jobs. We won't need workers. And he didn't know he was talking about AI. Mm-hmm. This is in the 70s. He was a futurist. And I said, so what happens when you don't have a job? And his words still right. I pass it on to everybody. He says, if you don't have a job, you have nothing to do. He says, ask yourself this question. What does God want done? What does God want done? And I left that seminar, this is in the 70s. I went, what does God want done? And I said, maybe I should teach.
Wow.
And I began teaching Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That seemed to be on my track. I had Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Uh-huh.
And that apparently was what I'm not really religious. I'm not pitching any kind of religion. Freedom of religion is my thing. But it seemed that was the path I was on.
Mm-hmm.
I was supposed to teach Rich Dad and Poor Dad.
That's powerful.
Yes. What does God want done? So if I could leave that with your listeners, what does God want you to do?
Mm-hmm.
What needs to be done? Not what do you want to do? What does God want done? Because your spirit has a mission.
Mm-hmm.
You may have a physical mission, but your spirit has a mission. Your spirit was sent here to do something. So what was your spirit sent to do?
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that story. What's so interesting about it to me is that we get to see what your spirit wanted you to do and what God wanted you to do, because we're able to see the result, which is so magnificent in so many ways. And your willingness to follow, to ponder that question and to pursue it despite all the odds is really amazing. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Well, you started it off by saying, how'd you handle rejection?
Mm-hmm. Because
the spirit may have wanted it, but the publisher didn't like it.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not easy. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right. It's not easy, but you persevered and created a huge result and helped millions and millions of people. It's really extraordinary. Yeah.
I love talking to younger guys like you because I just wish somebody had taught me, I just give it down back.
Mm-hmm.
If I could plug my cash flow board game, teach other people, you'll learn more.
Mm-hmm.
You teach, you learn, but you give and you shall learn.
Oh, that's great. Well, again, thank you so much for taking the time to spend with me today and with our audience and for the impact you've made. I mean, I remember reading your book when it first came out and several times since then, and it helped me learn how to think differently and challenge some of the conventional wisdom that I had been programmed with by my family of influence. And it's living it firsthand has just been extraordinary to now have you here with me. So thank you again.
And that's the power of giving, give and receive. That's why I aspire to do a great job, because great teachers there too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you.
We all are learners and teachers.
Yeah, as long as we can keep learning, there's opportunity ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of What's Your Deal. There's so much that I picked up from Robert during this session, and it's a mindset. So much of it is a mindset, and the tools that he's given us with the cash flow quadrant game and with his books and the whole brand is just a way of us to learn how to think differently, to get something different if we're ready for it. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and we will see you on the next episode. And that's a wrap on today's episode. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and got some valuable insights into the world of buying and selling businesses. Want to be a guest on our show? If you have a deal that you'd like to discuss with us or a business story to share, we'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email using the contact information below in the episode notes, and let's make this happen. Never miss an episode. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And if you found today's episode helpful, please leave us a review. It helps more people like you find the show.